This is going to be the Unreal Engine implementation side of all the audio that I was doing. So on the right-hand side, we have my audio folder set up. But let's look at Ambience first. So you'll see I have a sparkle source, a spawn area, sparkle, and then these are transitions for when you hit space. But let's listen to the sparkle. And it is just a drone. So if we open this up, take a look at the graph of what we got going on. But on play, we are going to play a Paul X stretch pad that I created. We're going to use an ADSR to ramp in and ramp out. And this is just a preset I created. If we take a look at that, it is just the left channel and the right channel because I got tired of trying to make two at a time. Give you that. Still on play. We're just going to wait 5 seconds after to start my sparkles. And this one, it's just a loop. And that way I didn't want it to start at the exact beginning. I could even probably change this down to like 2 seconds. But this has also got ADSR as well, so that fade in and out. And then I added in delay to get it around your head. And then this section is a sine wave, 200 hertz, being modulated by pink noise. And I'm using a filter to sweep in and out. And then that gets delayed and filtered and sent out to here. So if we play, you now have just the wind blowing around. And you can see left and right channels stereo delayed, so it's a little more unique. If we bring in this guy, that's your sparkle and the chordal drone. And it's just a matter of balancing it all. And then diffuser just to give it even more space. Originally this was going to be an overall stereo ambience, but what I ended up doing is, remember the sparkle source? So what this is just a blueprint, but what it's saying is when this sparkle is created, get the spawn area and then move it to a random location in the spawn area. When that's done, fade out the audio and then destroy the actor. Note that this fades out and destroys the sparkle audio component, whereas this destroys the entire actor. And I wanted to make sure we destroyed the actor after the fade out was finished so that you didn't cut out the fade on the audio component. And this just gets the spawn area box. As long as we are in this bounding box, it's gonna spawn an audio source and it's gonna move out. And so what this does is it provides like little ambient spheres that kind of float around. There's another one there. See one below. And you can just like hear it pass by. So it just adds like a fun little ambience, like wispy, magically thing going on. And so the area blueprint on begin play, every 3 seconds, this is gonna fire. And then we're gonna get all the actors in the scene. And as long as there are less than 20 of them, we're gonna spawn another one. If there's more than 20, don't spawn one. Because they auto-destroy, it'll always come down. So in theory, you would just like top out at 20 and there'd always be 20 on the map, but I don't spawn them fast enough to have that error. While we're in here, we can look at the transitions and I'll go play from here. Okay, there we go. Oh no. So those are the sounds we're listening to. Transition in, transition out, and the timer. So in is just the sound effect I made in Reaper. And then out, also a sound effect, but I added in stereo delay based on my BPM at 16th notes. And then the delay comes in over 1 second. And we're going from 0 to 1 on the dry level. So at first it's like really just you just hear the delay. And then by the end of it you hear the full audio file. And the reason I did that is so that the first bit is very ethereal and misty, and then by the end of it you get that solid thunk low end, mid to low, so that you know that you're out of time. So that's the transition out. This delay to on finished so that we don't collapse the Metasound graph too early. And then the transition timer, this note is my wave file, is 0.234 seconds long. Loop duration. So what I'm doing is I took a violin stab. Actually, listen. But what I do is I play a violin note and then over, where are you? We are adjusting the pitch of the violin from 0 semitones to 12 semitones, so we're moving it a full octave over 2 seconds. And then after 2 seconds, we release and we go back down from 12 to 0. And this only takes half of a second. So if we listen, now we're at full, and then there's the off. I probably should have done a fade out on that a little bit better. So this only plays on the in-between, and the reason I have the play and the stop is so that the violins loop, because I wasn't too sure how long the value would be for when you're in the alternative reality. Music, we'll touch in a moment. Sound effects, I have my templates, a bunch of presets that I just copy back and forth between my different projects. And that way, just like it's so much faster than trying to create your own. NPCs, enemies, enemy 1, so we have their attack, defeat, just like the hover motion, take a look at, or listen. So this was the interface of like how far the Metasound source is from the listener, which in this very specific would be how far is the enemy from the player's head. So what we're doing is if the distance between the enemy and the player is greater than 800 units, we're going to set 75 as a value. And what I'm doing is using these ranges to set the BPM, which 75, 112, these are all multiples of 75 so that everything stays in tempo to the music. And what that's doing is it's triggering a repeater on time to the music to then compare that it will then fire this tick sound and then this talk sound. So you remember the tick tock little sound files? So what it's doing is going tick tock, and then this occurs faster and faster and faster depending on how close the enemy is to the character. And so you'll see 250 units, we're going at 187.5 BPM, and they're 8th notes. So an 8th note pulse gets sent out, and then one of these two are played. And it's always going tick tock, because we have a 1 and a 2. And then those, I'm taking, this is a dry signal, or sorry, this is the sidechain signal that I'm mixing them together because I need both of them to control my compressor. And then this is just my final mix, and then I am compressing everything, a little bit of distortion, and then out. But this bottom line, taking a saw wave, and its bass frequency is, this is A sharp 70 MIDI, and then what I'm taking is 70 minus 12 times 4 to give me my bass frequency. This was an idea that didn't work. I'm taking a filter and getting rid of everything over 200 hertz. So basically I'm just creating a sub, sine sub, or saw sub. And then that is being volume adjusted every 1 hertz. And we're going from a value of full volume of 1 to half volume at 0.5. And that's adding a low end presence, which is then getting sidechained by the TikToks so that the bass or sub moves with the TikToks. And then that gets mixed in and the whole thing gets compressed. And so it's really hard to hear in game because there's just like a lot going on, but it's just a subtle low end texture in there. Take damage on play. I believe I just layered them. Yep. So that's when an enemy takes damage. When the enemy is defeated, they're supposed to play this. And then the enemy attack. Oh, this is one of those presets, random wave, mono. And what I ended up doing was play, get random wave in the wave player. And then these are just all outputs. So many outputs. But I needed a way to mix. And this was created, I believe, before the wave player mono was a thing. So that's why this exists. But all of these are just outputs or inputs. But I wanted to have the ability to change the pitch over time if I wanted. And then I do have a random minimum maximum so that if you're doing like footsteps or something, you could in theory put in one wave file and just have the pitch change, but the texture and tonality is so similar, you need at least 5 to get it sounding good. Time boss, objects and buildings. So the clock, probably notice if you walk by any of these clocks, you can hear the audio change. So you see this big yellow sphere, that's the attenuation curve, and I'll talk about that in a second. But this one is just get a random clock tick, play it, give me a random pitch so that each clock when it plays never sounds the same. Player, we have all of their different aspects, so like footsteps, an 80 envelope, like a one-shot random number generator. But this is just a filter to cut off any extras on it. So this is when the player takes time boss damage. The player's axe swing. User interface stuff. I have back, rollover, and select. So the back button, rollover, you can see it's the same thing. So you can actually preview here. Amazing. Okay, so that is the Metasound side of the SFX. I had mentioned attenuation concurrency. So attenuation is this sphere. See how we have a small sphere, then we have a big sphere. The smallest is if you are in that range, the volume plays at 100%, and then it falls off to this outer curve. So if we're looking at attenuations and the clock one, it's saying 250 units all the way out to 2,500 units. We're using a natural sound curve. So it's not just like a straight line, it's a little more, I don't know what the word is, like they have created a curve that sounds more natural than a logarithmic, a linear, or anything like that. So if you're trying to set up sounds that fade out over time, you need to use an attenuation curve so that you have that spatialization. Concurrency is just how many audio voices are playing at any one time. So this is applied to the enemy, and I'm saying just 3. I don't want to overload the players. If you saw there was, what, 8 enemies at once, and if we had 8 of those enemy sounds playing all at the same time, it would suck. It'd be way too much. Okay, so mixing in Unreal Engine got a big upgrade when 5.1 dropped, If you know anything about Dan Reynolds, he did a video on 4.6, I think, about control bus modulation. So it's been around for a bit, but 5.1 is when I've really started to like really dive into it. Your best bet is to watch his video, but the way I'm using it is to allow myself, the developer, to individually adjust levels of sounds based on relationship to what I hear of others without creating a sound class tree. So you'll notice I have, like, on my top level, this is all the stuff that the user can interact with, but I also have like a pitch all and a low pass. So like, let's just look at the master. What this is saying is it's a control bus, or like at a concert or a theater show or something, you see the mixing board and it's got all those little sliders on it. Think of that, this control bus, as a slider on a mix table. So this slider is controlling volume. This one in particular is controlling pitch. And then this one is a low pass cutoff frequency. You'll notice we have this color and then we've got this one as well. So a CBM is a control bus mix. So if this is the individual fader, this is a group of faders. You can see we got 3 of them there. So the user, or whoever is playing the game, can access the master, the music, and the sound effect sliders. And so every single sound in game is partially controlled by one of these 3, or by all of these. You're like, what is going on? It'll make more sense as we dive into it. So let's go look at what? Let's look at the player. So the player mix, we have attack deal damage, dash, footsteps, when they take time boss damage. So like that mixing board has a little slider for every single sound that occurs. Nice thing about doing it in Unreal Engine is you could have a mixing board that has more than 100 and, oh, what is the biggest one? I'll have to look at a photo at some point. But like a lot of sliders. This one though is the mixing board for the player. Okay, so the player's attack is affected by not just this little slider here. It is also impacted by the master slider and by the sound effects slider. If the player attack I want to balance manually, I use this attack slider, which is the value is located in here. This allows, oh my gosh, it's like a mixing board in a mixing board. So the player attack can be adjusted here by me, the developer. This I can use then to balance against the dash, the footsteps, so that stuff sounds good in the mix. That's what this control bus does. Control bus mix. We open up this one, and you'll notice this user mix, this guy, this master 0 to 1, this is the slider in the UI. That one needs to also control the attack, but it needs to do it on a global level, not on an individual level. So if I turn down the master, everything needs to go down. If I turn the SFX one, just the SFX needs to be turned down, not SFX and music. So if we look at this guy, you're like, what is going on? Don't worry about the curves. This is just how the volume fades over time. But look, there's the control bus. So that's the little slider. And there's another one for the sound effects slider and the master. So what this is saying is any of these 3 can turn down the volume on the player attack. And you're like, well, how does the player attack know that? Well, we go to the player attack, which is the attack swing. In the source, this is where that all gets overwritten. So not in attenuation, not in sound glass. We're not using these anymore. There are instant cases where you can use this, but not right now. So what we're doing is we're overriding the volume routing. We're modulating it using the parameter control bus parameter patch. So that would be right click, sounds, modulation, parameter patch. The pitch though because the time slowdown, I wanted everything to pitch uniformly. It's all just the single slider control bus. The pitch is not connected to anything else, and the low pass is also not connected to anything else. That's why they're the control bus and not a patch or a mix or anything. But you'll know every single sound in this project has some similar setup with its own patch. Hopefully that makes sense. So if you go to source, you can see there's the time boss damage, modulates, pitch, and low pass as well. So that way everything is adjusted by it. But that's how the mix works. So then let's talk music here. I had originally wanted to do it using a state tree. I'm currently working on a different version to do interactive music in that sense. Couldn't get it to work in time for this one. So that being said, let's take a look at the Metasound of what we did here. And you'll notice it's a pretty tight graph, but we've got some vinyl crackle. We've got ambient drone and generic level music. Okay, so Ambience drone is a Paul X stretch that I made. And then this is just like a mini mix within the actual Ambience, even though the source, you can pitch it, pass it. I probably should have had the volume routing in here. I definitely forgot to do that. Because this would be under the master. Because right now, nothing will turn it down. But the generic one, this was a backup I'd had, is, oh, look, it's blue. So you can actually put metasounds inside of metasounds. Metasound sources, I should say. Like, what is music generic level? Well, these are just some mixing. This is the inputs. And then this guy, if we open it up, actually, so I just created like a fade time there. This is a stop all after 2 seconds. Okay, so we're getting warmer. This is the piano for when we have slow music, mildly aggressive or like a little more up tempo, and then busy. So we have on play, we're just going to play the slow piano. We have a little attack, decay, sustain, release envelope, which I think might be redundant because I believe I have it into the cue point looper as well. And then I have a stereo crossfade. And what this does is that we're saying when we play piano mid or high, we're going to fade from A to B. So track A to track B. And you'll notice A has audio, B does not. So we're going from on full volume of something to off. And we're fading it over X amount of time. Play piano low is play the low energy, and we're going from B, which is 0, to A. And that gets sent out to the mix. And that's just repeated for the mids and the busy. And the bass as well. Using that same logic of, are we playing mids, are we playing highs, are we playing lows? And not like frequencies, but busyness levels. So this is playing the low busy. And so that's how you can crossfade between all of your different ones. So if we look at the stereo crossfade, it's an envelope going from 0 to 1 and then sending it out. Note, if you haven't watched Dan's video on float audio buffers, his newest one, as of January 19th, check it out. It's a really good primer on how Metasound works at a engine level. So that's a stereo crossfade, stereo ADSR I just created. So the instrument music cue point looper, this is why I have to use Reaper to put in those cue points. So what's happening is on play, we are getting a random wave from our wave array. We're playing it. But look, on cue point. So that little cue point is what triggers the next one. And that's going to play another random wave. And so you just have to know that your cue point is the exit of your file, and then the start of your next file just starts immediately at that same cue point. And then these two just cycle back and forth, back and forth. And then I do have an ADSR to just give a little bit of fade in and out time on the files. So that allows me to put in an array of cue point files. We'll take a look one actually. So if you scroll down in your audio file, we have one cue point and that gets you out. So that's how those all cycle through. So that's just your generic music. And then I did have time boss music. This was so that I could mix stuff. And this one, guess what, works very similar. So this one is the cue looper and with a stereo crossfade built in. And then we have another Metasound source, this time boss level 1. So here's your piano, your bass, hi-hats, crash and ride, snares, snare, kick. Because the fade time is 0 because it's an input. But this gets set outside of it, right here. So here again, similar one, a couple extra layers. And you can see the stereo mix is just massive, but because you have to choose all of your layers. And then the bass, in this instance, I did sidechain to the kick. That's why I don't bake it into my audio file, because this bass file could be playing a different rhythm and notes compared to what gets baked. And I didn't want to have the bass and the kick baked in together, because I never want the same kick pattern to be playing. I need to design the sound or the music to work, like, so that you can flip between them all. But so that's those ones. So that's music in a nutshell. You know, so I have an enum here. This is to track the game state. I needed to know if I was in the menu, if I was in regular gameplay, or if I was in the boss state. So if we look at the blueprint, now this one is actually just in the level here. But what we're doing is on play, get the main menu blueprint if it is valid. So what we're saying is, if we are in the main menu, set the state to main menu. Otherwise, we're in the primary level. Because I know, like, the only place you can go to once you hit start is in the primary level. Note that this will fire upon the level load, and the level load occurs after that little cutscene. This is not for every scenario. So if we're in the main menu, we're just going to bypass this bottom chunk. But if we are in the level, we've set the primary level. We are grabbing the player character. We are binding to the trigger realm audio. We are getting the boss trigger zone. I'm binding to that event of when you enter it. And then we are also getting the boss. And then I am setting a very quick looper, not using event tick, setting up. But this is important for getting your mixes to work properly. You have to activate the control buses. So this little one, we're loading a mix from the profile. This will talk about when we talk about UI. And then these are all of the control bus mixes, CBMs, UI, objects, ambience, like everything. So those all get activated because they all need to be working, because that's how you set your little mini mixes for every section. So if we go back to the event graph, okay, so we set the mixes. We are going to create the music, the 2D sound. That's your Metasound system. And then we're going to check to see if there is a Quartz clock. There shouldn't be, but if there is not, We're going to create a new clock. It's going to be a 4/4 time setting, named the clock, cached the clock, set the BPM. Just realized that should be 75. Oops. Play the music, cue it to the clock. So check out Dan's videos on quantization, play quantized, all of that. He's got some really great info on there. What we're saying is on the bar, the very first bar, cue the music. And then run the function play music layers. We need to look at this little event here, cue music. So this one, what it's saying is we are not actually going to start the clock until we have primed or cued the Metasound. So like loaded it into memory, have it ready to go, and that is time aligned. Once that is done, we are going to resume the clock, which then also plays the audio file on time. This play music layers is going to run to another function, which we'll talk about in a second. This is for when you hit spacebar. You notice the low pass filter? So what we're doing is when you hit space the first time, we're low passing it. And then when you hit a second time, you are, or like when you exit the realm, you are no longer low passing it. So it just like filters it in and out. Cueing the music. This is to get updated quantity of enemies in range. And then this is the remaining boss health and executing trigger parameters. Have we entered the boss? If so, yes, do this. And then this is on player death. You're going to do these guys, not this one. And then this was just for print string testing. Delta seconds on your print string duration allows it just for a single line item, so you don't have like that wall of text. Okay, so let's jump over to play music layers. So this is just going to immediately start a timer, and it's going to click away at a really quick rate. I'm sure there's a better way to do this. I just haven't invested the time to figure it out. But as long as we are not dead, and we're not in the main menu, so basically it'll either primary or boss level, we're going to enter this thing. So what? This was my like last minute hack to get the audio to move between different states. State tree, I could do it a lot smoother. This one just, it works. So if there's 2 enemies, if there's in between 2 and 4, and if there's over 4 enemies. And the way Dino is counting enemies is based on groups and not individual actors. So that was just a unique way to manage that. But what we're saying is, if we are less than 2, fire the play piano low, then go to the output. As well, reset the mids and reset the highs. Now, no, this doesn't actually go out anywhere. I might not even need this. But this repeats for everybody else. So play the mids, then reset that one. And I think I turned this off for a reason and I forget exactly what it was. And reset that. And then the same for the highs. Okay, so that's that one. And then time boss, exact same thing. First thing we do though is we stop the level piano because we don't want the generic level music playing. And then if the boss's health is greater than 9 or less than 9 and greater than 5 or less than 5 is when you play the different boss levels. Time boss level 1, time boss level 2. So that is how the music works in the game. That covers all of the audio in game. The only thing left is the little volume. So we have an audio gameplay volume encompassing the whole map. And what this is doing, so look at the details here, is it applying a reverb volume of forest, just to give a little spatialization to this area. It's a fun jam, 7 days to get not as much done as possible. I think the biggest thing I took away was learning how the mixing system worked using control buses. Hopefully you learned something along this little journey from me as well. And thank you so much for your time.